The air in Millhaven smelled of rust and regret, a small Ohio town where dreams went to die under the weight of factory smoke. Elias Kane, 24 and hollowed out, stood on the sagging porch of his family's home, staring at the letter in his hand. It was an eviction notice, the third in 6 months, and this time, the bank wasn't bluffing. He'd known this day was coming. The Kanes had been drowning since their father walked out 5 years ago, leaving behind a mortgage, a stack of medical bills from their mother's chemo, and 2 sons who couldn't afford to grieve. Elias, the eldest, had dropped out of college to work double shifts at the diner, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. His mother, Ruth, was too frail to work, and his younger brother, Caleb, was a golden boy with a football scholarship and a one-way ticket out of this crumbling town. Elias didn't resent Caleb. Not yet, but the weight of being the family's backbone was crushing him. Tonight, though, Elias had a plan. A dangerous, shameful one. He'd heard whispers at the diner about a man named Victor Crane, a wealthy businessman who frequented the city an hour away. Crane had a reputation, discreet, generous, and willing to pay for company. Elias had ignored the rumors for months, but desperation had a way of eroding pride. He'd made the call last night, his voice shaking as he agreed to meet Crane at a sleek downtown hotel. The deal was simple: 1 night for enough cash to keep the bank at bay for 6 months. 1 night to save his family. Elias stuffed the eviction notice into his pocket and glanced at the rainbow flag pinned to the porch railing. He'd hung it there last year, a quiet rebellion after years of hiding who he was. Millhaven wasn't kind to people like him. The town's preacher had called him an abomination at 17, and his father's parting words had been a slurred demand to stop being a fag. Elias had learned to keep his head down, to love in shadows. But tonight, he'd step into a different kind of shadow, one that paid. The front door creaked open, and Caleb stepped out, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "You're still here," Caleb said, his voice light but edged with impatience. "Coach says I gotta be at practice by 7 tomorrow. Big game next week. Scouts are coming." Elias forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss seeing you off, superstar." Caleb was 19, all lean muscle and effortless charm, the kind of kid who made people believe in second chances. He'd been scouted by colleges since junior year, and now Ohio State was calling. Elias had spent his own college fund on Ruth's hospital bills, but Caleb's future was untouchable. Sacred. "You okay?" Caleb asked, squinting at him. "You look like shit." Elias laughed, sharp and hollow. "Long day at the diner. Don't worry about me." Caleb shrugged, already halfway down the steps. "Tell Mom I'll call her after practice. And, thanks for holding things down, Eli. I know it's been rough." Rough didn't begin to cover it. Elias watched Caleb's taillights disappear down the street, the weight of the night settling heavier on his chest. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the bus station. The address of the hotel burned into his mind. Victor Crane was waiting. The city was a shock of light and noise after Millhaven's suffocating quiet. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble and chandeliers, a world Elias didn't belong in. He adjusted his jacket, feeling the eyes of the concierge slide over him like he was something to be swept under the rug. Crane had sent instructions. Room 1408, 10th floor, knock twice. Elias's hands shook as he rode the elevator, the mirrored walls reflecting a version of himself he barely recognized. Pale, sharp-jawed, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Victor Crane opened the door before Elias could knock a second time. He was older, maybe late 40s, with silver at his temples and a smile that was too polished to trust. "You must be Elias," he said, his voice smooth as whiskey. "Come in." The room was all clean lines and expensive furniture, a bottle of wine already open on the table. Elias's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to step inside. "Let's get this over with," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Crane raised an eyebrow, amused. "No need to rush. We have all night." Elias didn't want all night. He wanted the money and the door. But Crane's gaze was heavy, appraising, and Elias felt the weight of his own desperation pinning him in place. He thought of his mother, coughing in her sleep. Of Caleb, chasing a future Elias would never have. Of the eviction notice burning a hole in his pocket. "I'm here for the deal," Elias said, forcing his chin up. You know why. Crane's smile widened, predatory but calm. Oh, I know. And I admire a man who knows his price. The words stung, but Elias didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. As Crane poured 2 glasses of wine, Elias steeled himself for what came next, unaware that this night would unravel everything he thought he knew about sacrifice, love, and the cost of survival. Elias sat on the edge of the hotel bed, his hands clenched in his lap, the wine untouched on the table. Victor Crane moved with the ease of a man who owned every room he walked into, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Elias's faded jeans. The air was thick with unspoken expectations, and Elias's pulse hammered in his ears. He'd told himself he could do this, detach, deliver, leave. But the reality of Crane's gaze, sharp and hungry, made his skin crawl. "You're nervous," Crane said, settling into an armchair across from him. "That's natural. First time." Elias's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" Crane chuckled, low and warm, like they were old friends. "Not really, but I like to know who I'm dealing with. Tell me about yourself, Elias. What brings a boy like you to a place like this?" Elias wanted to snap that he wasn't a boy, that he was here because his family was drowning, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he said, "I need the money. That's all you need to know." Crane leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes glinting with curiosity. "Everyone needs money. But you're carrying something heavier than that. I can see it. Family trouble? Sick parent? Sibling you're trying to save?" Elias's stomach lurched. He didn't like how easily Crane read him, like his pain was a book left open on a table. "You don't know me," he said, his voice low. "Not yet," Crane replied, standing and crossing the room. He stopped in front of Elias, close enough that Elias could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive. "But I'd like to. You're not just here for a transaction, Elias. You're here because you're willing to break yourself for someone else. That's rare." Elias looked away, his eyes landing on the city skyline beyond the window. He thought of Millhaven, of the diner's greasy air, of his mother's frail hands folding laundry she could barely lift. He thought of Caleb, shining under stadium lights, untouchable. "Let's just do this," he said, standing abruptly. Crane didn't move, his expression unreadable. "In a hurry to sell your soul?" "It's not my soul I'm selling," Elias shot back, his voice cracking. He hated how raw he sounded, how exposed. Crane's smile softened, almost pitying. "We'll see." The night blurred after that. Elias let himself go numb, focusing on the mechanics of it all, Crane's instructions, the cold efficiency of the exchange. When it was over, Crane handed him an envelope thick with cash, his fingers lingering on Elias's as he passed it over. "You did well," Crane said, like Elias had passed some kind of test. "Call me if you need more. I have a feeling you will." Elias left the hotel at dawn, the envelope tucked inside his jacket, his body aching in ways he couldn't name. The bus ride back to Millhaven was silent, the world outside a gray smear. He felt like he'd left something behind in that room, something he'd never get back. But the envelope was heavy, real. Enough to pay the bank, to keep the heat on, to give Ruth a few more months of peace. When he got home, Ruth was in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she stirred a pot of soup. "You were out late," she said, her voice soft but probing. "Everything okay, Eli?" He forced a smile, slipping the envelope into a drawer. "Yeah, Mom. Just picked up an extra shift." She didn't push, but her eyes lingered on him, heavy with questions she didn't ask. Elias turned away, unable to meet her gaze. He showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing at his skin like he could wash away the night. But Crane's voice lingered, his words like a splinter under Elias's skin. "You're willing to break yourself for someone else." The next few days were a haze of routine. Elias worked at the diner, served coffee to truckers, and avoided his own reflection. Caleb called once, his voice bright with news about a scout from Michigan who'd watched his last game. "They're talking full ride, Eli," he said. "Can you believe it?" Elias could. He'd always believed in Caleb, even when it hurt. "That's amazing, Cal," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "You're gonna kill it." But the money from Crane wouldn't last forever. By the end of the week, another bill arrived, this time for Ruth's medication, a number so high it made Elias's vision blur. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers, Crane's card burning a hole in his wallet. He didn't want to call. He couldn't. But the alternative was watching his family sink. Late that night, he dialed the number. Crane answered on the first ring, his voice smooth and expectant. "Elias," he said, like he'd been waiting. "I was hoping you'd call." Elias's second meeting with Victor Crane was different. The hotel was the same, the room just as pristine, but Crane's demeanor had shifted, less predatory, more familiar, like he was welcoming an old friend. Elias hated it. He didn't want familiarity. He wanted distance, a clean line between what he was doing and who he was. But Crane had a way of blurring that line, his questions slipping under Elias's defenses like water through cracks. "You're back," Crane said, pouring wine again. He didn't offer this time. He just handed Elias a glass. "What's the money for this time? Another bill? Or something bigger?" Elias took the glass, but didn't drink. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," Crane said, sitting closer than last time, his knee brushing Elias's. "I'm not just buying your time, Elias. I'm investing in you. There's a difference." Elias's laugh was bitter. "You're paying for a service. Let's not dress it up." Crane's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back, studying Elias like a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Tell me about your family. The ones you're doing this for." Elias stiffened. He didn't want Crane in his head, didn't want him touching the parts of his life that still felt sacred. But the words came anyway, spilling out like they'd been waiting for permission. He told Crane about Ruth, her quiet strength and fading health. About Caleb, the brother who carried all their hopes. About the house they were fighting to keep, the only thing tying them to a past that hadn't yet broken them. Crane listened, his expression unreadable. When Elias finished, he said, "You're carrying a lot for someone so young. Most people would have run by now." "I'm not most people," Elias said, his voice sharp. "And I don't need your pity." "Not pity," Crane said. "Respect." The word felt like a trap, but Elias didn't have time to untangle it. The night unfolded much like the first, though this time, Elias felt less like he was losing himself. He was learning the rules, hardening his edges. When it was over, Crane handed him another envelope, thicker than the last. "You're worth more than you think," Crane said, his voice low. "Don't forget that." Elias didn't respond. He took the money and left, the weight of it both a lifeline and a chain. Back in Millhaven, life ground on. Elias paid the pharmacy, kept the lights on, and smiled when Ruth asked how he was managing. But the secret was eating him alive. He started avoiding the diner's mirrors, afraid of what he'd see. He stopped looking at the rainbow flag on the porch, its colors now a reminder of a freedom he couldn't afford. Then Caleb came home for a weekend, his presence like a burst of sunlight in their dim house. He was all stories and laughter, talking about campus life, his new teammates, the girls who followed him after games. Elias listened, nodding, but his chest ached with something he couldn't name. Envy, maybe, or just exhaustion. "You're quiet," Caleb said one night, sprawled on the couch with a beer. "What's going on with you, Eli?" "Nothing," Elias said, too quickly. "Just tired." Caleb frowned, his eyes searching Elias's face. "You're always tired. You're doing too much. Why don't you let me help? I could get a job." "No." Elias cut him off, sharper than he meant to. "You focus on school. On football. That's your job." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He never did. Elias was the one who fixed things, who carried the weight. That was how it had always been. But the weight was getting heavier. Elias started seeing Crane more often, once a week, then twice. Each meeting chipped away at him, but the money kept the wolves at bay. Crane started asking for more than just nights. He wanted dinners, conversations, moments that felt too close to intimacy. Elias drew lines where he could, but Crane was relentless, his charm a slow poison. One night, as Elias was leaving, Crane grabbed his wrist, his grip firm but not cruel. "You don't have to do this forever," he said. "I could help you, really help you. Your family, too." Elias pulled away, his heart pounding. "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," Crane said, his voice soft but insistent. "It's an offer. Think about it." Elias didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to think about Crane at all. But as he rode the bus back to Millhaven, The offer lingered, a dangerous temptation in a life with too few options. Elias's life became a tightrope, each step a calculation between survival and self-destruction. The meetings with Crane were routine now, a grim rhythm that paid the bills but left him hollow. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd stop once Ruth's health stabilized, once Caleb graduated. But the truth was uglier. There was no end in sight. The money was a bandage on a wound that kept bleeding. Crane's offer hung over him like a storm cloud. It wasn't just money anymore. Crane was dangling something bigger, a way out, a future. He'd started talking about connections, opportunities, a job in the city where Elias could use his mind instead of his body. It sounded like salvation, but Elias didn't trust it. Men like Crane didn't give without taking. One evening, as Elias was leaving the hotel, Crane handed him a business card for a gallery in Cleveland. "They're looking for someone with an eye for art," Crane said. "You mentioned you studied it before you dropped out. I could put in a word." Elias stared at the card, his thumb tracing the embossed letters. He'd loved art once, spent hours sketching in notebooks he'd since burned. But that was a different life, a different Elias. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low. "What's in it for you?" Crane's smile was enigmatic. "Maybe I see something in you worth saving." Elias wanted to throw the card back, to tell Crane to keep his strings attached to someone else. But he slipped it into his pocket instead, hating himself for it. Back in Millhaven, things were unraveling. Ruth's health was declining again, her cough sharper, her energy fading. The diner cut Elias's hours, and the bills piled up faster than he could pay them. He started skipping meals to save money, his body growing leaner, his eyes more haunted. Caleb noticed. He came home for Thanksgiving, his presence a reminder of everything Elias was fighting for, and everything he'd lost. They sat at the kitchen table, Ruth asleep upstairs, the silence between them heavy. "You're not okay," Caleb said, his voice quiet but firm. "Don't lie to me, Eli. What's going on?" Elias's throat tightened. He wanted to tell Caleb everything. The nights with Crane, the money, the shame. But he couldn't. Caleb was the one who got to shine, the one who got to escape. Elias wouldn't drag him down. "Just work stuff," Elias said, forcing a smile. "Money's tight, but I'm handling it." Caleb didn't buy it. "You're always handling it. But you're killing yourself, man. Let me help." "I can." "No." Elias snapped, his voice sharper than he meant. "You've got your shot, Cal. Don't screw it up." Caleb's eyes flashed with hurt, then anger. "You think I don't see what you're doing? You're throwing your life away for me and Mom. It's not fair, Eli. You deserve better." Elias laughed, a raw, broken sound. "Fair's got nothing to do with it." Caleb left the next day, his goodbye stiff, his eyes avoiding Elias's. The distance between them was growing, and Elias felt it like a knife. He'd always been the one to hold the family together, but now he wondered if he was tearing it apart. That night, he called Crane again. Not for the money this time, but for the escape. The gallery job was a long shot, but it was something, a flicker of hope in a life that felt like a slow suffocation. Crane was pleased, too pleased, and arranged a meeting with the gallery owner, a woman named Lena who was all sharp edges and sharper questions. "You've got no formal experience," Lena said, eyeing Elias over her glasses. "Why should I take a chance on you?" Elias hesitated, then thought of Crane's words. "You're worth more than you think." "Because I see things other people miss," he said. "I know what it's like to fight for something beautiful, even when it hurts." Lena raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Come back tomorrow. Bring a portfolio." Elias left the gallery feeling lighter than he had in months. For the first time, he let himself imagine a life beyond Millhaven, beyond Crane. But when he got home, Ruth was waiting, her face pale and her hands clutching a new hospital bill. The number was staggering, a gut punch that erased his fragile hope. He didn't hesitate. He called Crane. The gallery job became Elias's lifeline, a fragile thread pulling him towards something better. Lena hired him part-time, impressed by the raw emotion in his sketches, though she warned him the pay was barely enough to live on. Still, it was a start, a chance to be more than a transaction in a hotel room. But the hospital bill loomed, and Crane's money was the only thing keeping it at bay. Elias tried to cut back on the meetings, but Crane was relentless. He'd started calling Elias outside their usual schedule, his texts a mix of charm and insistence. "Dinner tonight? I miss our talks." Elias ignored them when he could, but the bills didn't stop, and neither did Crane's hold over him. One night, Crane took him to a rooftop restaurant, the city sprawling below like a sea of stars. Elias felt out of place in his borrowed blazer, the weight of Crane's hand on his back too heavy. "You're doing well at the gallery," Crane said, sipping his wine. "Lena speaks highly of you. I told you I could open doors." Elias's jaw clenched. "I'm not your project." "No," Crane agreed, his eyes glinting. "But you could be my partner. Think about it, Elias. No more scraping by. No more Millhaven. Just you and me, building something." The offer was a siren song, tempting and dangerous. Elias wanted to believe in it, to believe he could have a life where he wasn't defined by sacrifice. But he didn't trust Crane, didn't trust the way his kindness always came with a price. "I'll think about it," Elias said, his voice flat. He wouldn't, but he needed to keep Crane on his side until he could stand on his own. Back in Millhaven, Ruth's condition worsened. The doctors talked about experimental treatments, but the costs were astronomical. Elias took on extra shifts at the gallery, sketching late into the night, but it wasn't enough. He started avoiding Caleb's calls, unable to bear the guilt of lying to him. Then Caleb showed up unannounced, his face stormy as he stormed into the house. "You're avoiding me," he said, dropping his bag on the floor. "What the hell, Eli? I'm not a kid anymore. Tell me what's going on." Elias's heart pounded. He couldn't tell Caleb the truth. Not about Crane, not about the money. "It's just work," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm busy." "Bullshit," Caleb snapped. "You're falling apart, and you think I don't see it? I found the hospital bills, Eli. How are you paying for them? You're not making that kind of money at the diner." Elias's stomach dropped. "Stay out of it, Cal." "No," Caleb said, stepping closer. "You're my brother. I'm not letting you do this alone." Elias wanted to scream, to tell Caleb to stop being so damn noble, to just take his perfect life and go. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he turned away, his hands shaking. "You don't get it," he whispered. "You don't have to." Caleb grabbed his arm, forcing him to turn back. "Then make me get it. Talk to me, Eli." For a moment, Elias almost broke. The truth was there, clawing at his throat, but he swallowed it down. "Go back to school," he said, pulling away. "You've got a game this weekend, right? Focus on that." Caleb's eyes burned with frustration, but he didn't push. He left the next morning, and Elias felt the rift between them widen, a chasm he didn't know how to bridge. That night, Elias went to Crane, not for the money but for the oblivion. He let Crane's words wash over him, let the wine dull the edges of his guilt. But as he lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, he realized something. He wasn't just selling his body anymore. He was selling his hope, his future, everything he'd fought to hold on to. The next day, he went to the gallery, his sketches darker, more jagged. Lena noticed, pulling him aside. "You've got talent, Elias," she said. "But you're carrying something heavy. If you don't let it go, it'll bury you." Elias didn't know how to let it go, but he knew he couldn't keep going like this. He had to find a way out, before Crane owned him completely, before he lost Caleb for good, before he forgot who he was. Elias started fighting back in small ways. He took on more hours at the gallery, pouring himself into his work until his hands ached from sketching. Lena became a mentor, pushing him to enter a local art show, a chance to get his name out there. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of who he used to be, the kid who dreamed of creating something lasting, something beautiful. But Crane was a shadow he couldn't shake. The meetings continued, each one a reminder of the life Elias was trying to escape. Crane sensed the shift in him, his questions growing sharper, his offers more insistent. "You're pulling away," he said one night, his voice low as they sat in his car outside the hotel. "I don't like it." Elias's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm trying to build something for myself. You said you wanted that for me." "I do," Crane said, his hand resting on Elias's knee. "But you don't get to walk away without my help. You need me, Elias. Don't forget that." The words were a warning, and Elias felt them like a noose tightening. He nodded, forcing a smile. but inside, he was screaming. He couldn't keep doing this. He wouldn't. Back in Millhaven, Ruth's health took a sharp turn. The doctors recommended a new treatment, one that could buy her years, but the cost was a mountain Elias couldn't climb. He sold his father's old watch, pawned his laptop, but it was a drop in the bucket. Crane's offer loomed larger, a devil's bargain that promised everything and threatened to take more. Then Caleb came home again, this time with news that shook Elias to his core. "I'm dropping out," Caleb said, his voice steady as they stood in the kitchen. "I'm getting a job. I'm not letting you carry this alone anymore." Elias stared at him, his chest tight with panic. "No, you're not throwing your life away." "It's not throwing it away," Caleb said, his eyes fierce. "It's choosing family. You've been killing yourself for us, Eli. I see it. I'm not blind." "You don't know what you're talking about," Elias said, his voice breaking. He wanted to tell Caleb everything, to unburden himself, but the shame was too heavy. "You've got a future. Don't ruin it." Caleb's face softened, and for the first time, Elias saw something new in his brother's eyes. Understanding, maybe, or love. "You're my future, too," Caleb said. "I'm not going anywhere until we figure this out together." Elias broke then, the tears he'd held back for years spilling over. He told Caleb everything. Not the details, not Crane's name, but enough. The money, the nights, the sacrifices. Caleb listened, his face pale, his fists clenched. When Elias finished, Caleb pulled him into a hug, fierce and unyielding. "You're not doing this alone anymore," Caleb said. "I don't care what it takes. We're in this together." For the first time, Elias believed him. They spent the night talking, planning, piecing together a way forward. Caleb would stay in school, but take a part-time job. Elias would keep working at the gallery, entering the art show. They'd find a way to pay for Ruth's treatment, even if it meant scraping by. But Crane wasn't done. The next time Elias saw him, Crane's charm was gone, replaced by a cold edge. "I heard about your art show," he said, his voice clipped. "You think you can just walk away? I made you, Elias. I can unmake you." Elias's blood ran cold, but he stood his ground. "I'm done," he said. "No more." Crane's smile was thin, dangerous. "We'll see." The art show was a small affair, held in a converted warehouse in Cleveland, but to Elias, it felt like the world. His sketches hung on the walls, raw and honest, each one a piece of the pain and hope he'd carried for years. Lena had pushed him to include a self-portrait, a stark charcoal drawing of a man caught between light and shadow, his eyes haunted but defiant. It was Elias, unfiltered, and it terrified him to have it seen. Caleb was there, standing proudly by his side, his football jersey traded for a button-up shirt. Ruth came too, frail but beaming, her presence a quiet strength. For the first time in years, Elias felt like he was part of something whole, something worth fighting for. The show went better than he'd dared hope. A local critic praised his work, and a buyer offered to purchase 2 pieces. It wasn't enough to solve their problems, but it was a start, a real one. Elias let himself believe, just for a moment, that he could build a life on his own terms. Then Crane appeared. He stood in the corner of the warehouse, his suit impeccable, his eyes locked on Elias. The air shifted, heavy with threat. Elias excused himself from Caleb and Ruth, his heart pounding as he approached Crane. "What are you doing here?" Elias asked, his voice low. Crane's smile was cold. "I wanted to see what you're throwing me away for." Impressive, Elias, but naive. "You think a few drawings will save you?" "I don't need saving," Elias said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "I'm done with you." Crane stepped closer, his voice a whisper. "You'll regret this. I know people, Elias. People who can make sure your little art career never takes off. People who can make life very hard for your family." Elias's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, Caleb was there, his presence a wall between them. "Back off," Caleb said, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't know who you are, but you're done talking to my brother." Crane's eyes flicked to Caleb, then back to Elias. For a moment, Elias thought he'd push back, but Crane only smiled, a predator retreating to strike another day. "We'll talk soon," he said, then turned and left. Elias's legs shook, But Caleb's hand on his shoulder kept him steady. Who was that? Caleb asked. No one, Elias said, his voice hoarse. No one that matters. But Crane wasn't no one. Over the next few weeks, Elias felt his shadow everywhere. Calls from unknown numbers, a gallery client pulling out at the last minute, a letter warning of a lien on their house. Crane was playing a long game, and Elias was running out of moves. Then Ruth called them both to the kitchen one evening, her face calm but resolute. I know what you've been doing, Eli, she said, her voice soft but firm. Not everything, but enough. And I'm so sorry you felt you had to carry this alone. Elias's throat closed, but Ruth kept going. We're a family. We fight together. No more secrets. They made a plan. Caleb took a job at a local gym, coaching kids on weekends. Elias worked with Lena to secure a grant for emerging artists, enough to cover Ruth's treatment for a year. They sold the house, moving into a smaller apartment, but it was theirs, free of Crane's shadow. Elias never saw Crane again, but the fear lingered, a reminder of how close he'd come to losing himself. He kept drawing, his work growing bolder, more honest. Caleb graduated, not with a football scholarship, but with a degree and a job that let him stay close to home. Ruth's health stabilized, and she started painting again, her canvases bright with the colors of survival. One evening, as Elias hung a new rainbow flag outside their apartment, Caleb joined him, his smile soft. You did it, Eli, he said. You kept us together. Elias shook his head, his eyes on the flag. We did it. Together. And for the first time, he believed it. The weight was still there, but it was lighter now, shared. Elias had sold pieces of himself to keep his family alive, but in the end, he'd found something worth more than money. A family that fought for him, a future he could build, and a love, for himself, for who he was, that no one could take away.